Most people approach procrastination from a productivity standpoint. They're always hunting for new time management techniques or apps to help them focus, but there's a very simple reason why these things tend to not work very well in the long run. And that is this: procrastination is a psychology problem, not a productivity problem. If you want to overcome your tendency to procrastinate in any area of life for good and in the long run, you need to understand your psychology better before you start running around looking for all sorts of productivity hacks and tips and tricks. Hi, my name is Nick Wignall. I'm a clinical psychologist and the founder of The Friendly Mind, a free weekly newsletter where I share practical, evidence-based advice for emotional health and well-being. And in my career, I've helped hundreds of people overcome chronic procrastination, and I've done it by helping them understand their psychology better. And in the rest of this video, I'm going to share with you 3 of the most common psychological causes of procrastination. Number 1, emotional intolerance. Now, if you're watching this video, there's a good chance you are relatively psychologically sophisticated in that you understand emotions probably play a really big role in your tendency to procrastinate. Again, in whatever area of life that is, whether it's procrastinating for tasks at work or procrastinating on maybe your physical fitness goals or dietary goals. Could be anything, relationship issues. Procrastination shows up everywhere. And if you've struggled with procrastination for a while and thought about it or read some things about it or listened to other videos about it, it shouldn't be surprising that, again, emotions play some role. The big mistake, though, that people make is they assume that emotions, difficult emotions like anxiety, fear, guilt, things like that, they assume those difficult emotions cause procrastination. That's not true. And it's not true at all. To illustrate this, think about, let's say you get to work and you're sitting down, you check a few emails and you think, okay, I've been procrastinating on this big report I got to write. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write it. I'm not going to procrastinate. But then all of a sudden you start feeling a little anxious, right? Some kind of self-doubts maybe creep into your mind about, am I doing this good enough? Like, I don't know if it's going to be good. It's probably not going to be good. What if people think it's terrible? And you start to feel really anxious. So what do? Well, you say, you know what? I'll get to it this afternoon. I'll do some other little things and maybe build up my confidence first, and then I'll tackle the big thing later this afternoon. So you procrastinate. Now, just because anxiety happened right before you decided to procrastinate doesn't actually mean that anxiety caused the procrastination. We're going to get really nuanced here, but it's really critical, as I'll show. What really causes procrastination is the avoidance of difficult emotions like anxiety. And that avoidance comes from intolerance. So let me explain. Again, you're getting ready to do something and you start feeling a little bit anxious. Another example maybe is, let's say you're getting ready to go to the gym. You've decided, maybe it's a New Year's resolution or something like that, but you're going to start going to the gym more often. So you get your stuff ready and then you start worrying about, I'm so out of shape. Like everyone else at the gym is going to be super fit. And like, what are they going to think of me walking in? And you start to feel kind of ashamed. And that shame is pushing you to procrastinate. Or I'll just go for a run outside of my house. What's going on there? The shame isn't causing you to procrastinate. It's because you can't tolerate that feeling of shame, because you want to make it go away. That's why you're procrastinating. This is a fundamentally different way of looking at procrastination, and it's ultimately so much helpful if you want to overcome procrastination. That is, procrastinating is a coping mechanism for difficult emotions. We use it as a way to get rid of or avoid emotions like anxiety, shame, embarrassment, fear, things like that. All those normal emotions that come up whenever we're doing something or planning on doing something significant, like something big for work, or, starting a new habit, like going to the gym, or even, frankly, sometimes really little things like, texting back your friend. They text you and it's been 24 hours, 48 hours, and you still haven't texted them back. Why aren't you texting them back? You feel embarrassed or ashamed that you didn't text them back earlier. And now you think, it's too late. Like, what are they going to think of me? But again, remember that shame, that embarrassment, that's not what's causing the procrastination. The reason you're procrastinating is because you can't tolerate that shame, that fear of them thinking badly of you. So you're using procrastination to get out of, to avoid, to escape that difficult emotion. Now, I said before, this is critical to actually, if you want to overcome procrastination, you have to understand this kind of nuanced relationship between difficult emotions and procrastination. Namely, they don't cause procrastination. It's actually your desire and tendency to avoid those difficult emotions that is procrastination. By definition, that's what procrastination is. It's avoiding a goal or a task that's important to you because you're unwilling to feel some difficult emotion. Usually anxiety or fear. It's usually some version of anxiety or fear, but often shame, embarrassment, something like that as well. So what do we do about this? Well, if your intolerance of difficult emotions is what's leading to procrastination, flip it around. By becoming more tolerant of difficult emotions, you don't need procrastination. So instead of assuming I can't be anxious if I want to get started on this report, or I can't go to the gym and feel ashamed at the same time, that's called emotional reasoning. It's making decisions based on how you feel or want to feel rather than based on what the right thing to do is. So the key to overcoming that emotional reasoning and working through those emotional challenges to doing meaningful work instead of procrastinating is to be willing to tolerate those emotions instead of avoiding them or getting rid of them. And that word willingness is really key, because you can't either try to get rid of or avoid a difficult emotion. While it might make it's going to give you some relief in the short term, you think, okay, I don't have to do that. I don't have to deal with all that anxiety and insecurity about writing this report. I get a reprieve for a couple hours. Of course, it's never a couple hours, right? It's a couple days and then a couple weeks and then, months maybe. But anyway, the secret is to develop your capacity to tolerate those emotions instead of avoiding them or trying to get rid of them. And this is challenging, obviously, because emotions like anxiety or shame, they're really uncomfortable, painful even sometimes. So it can seem intimidating to think like, oh God, I just have to sit with all that anxiety or all that shame. Like any difficult skill, you don't just decide to do it. You slowly practice and work your way up. So here's what I would recommend doing. Find situations, it doesn't even have to be in terms of procrastination, just generally, find situations where you get little tiny bits of difficult emotion. Things that are like a 1 or a 2 out of 10. Things normally you wouldn't even do much about. They would just roll off you. A tiny bit of nervousness or a little bit of irritation or a smidge of sadness, something like that. And instead of just going about your day like you normally would, use those as opportunities to practice this skill of emotional tolerance, of being willing to have an emotion and keep on going, acting, following through on whatever your goal is, regardless of that feeling. You're not trying to get rid of it. You're not running away. You're literally saying, oh, hey there, anxiety. Hey there, sadness. You are more than willing to have them come along for the ride. You're not trying to make them go away. And once you start practicing with really small emotions, you can work your way up slowly to bigger and more intense emotions. And as you do that, again, like any skill in life, slowly your confidence and competence will rise. And that's what's going to allow you to be able to tackle those big bursts of anxiety before you have to do something, a big task that you tend to procrastinate on a lot. Because again, you will have the confidence and the competence to tolerate and have those emotions and do the difficult task anyway. Okay, if you're interested in learning more about emotional tolerance and ultimately crafting a healthier, more resilient relationship with any kind of difficult emotion, anxiety, fear, anger, whatever it is, I teach a 4-week masterclass called Mood Mastery, which is all about my unique approach to building emotional resilience and crafting a healthier relationship with your own emotions. If you're interested in that, you can check out, there's a link in the description below of this video. Number 2, task goal confusion. One of the biggest problems I see when I work with folks who struggle with chronic procrastination is that they constantly default to this idea that the solution to procrastination is some combination of either more willpower or more discipline. I have to be a more disciplined person. Why can't I need to build up my willpower muscle, and then I'll be able to push through procrastination. And this is a really common idea. You see this all over the place. It's very common, and there's a book. I actually really like the book in some ways. It's called The War of Art, and it's about procrastination. It's about overcoming the inevitable resistance everyone feels when they're trying to create something new, whether that's like art, or even just getting things done at work, or again, going to the gym, exercising, whatever it is. It's a great book in a lot of ways, but something I don't like about it is this thing you see all over our culture, which is framing procrastination in terms of combat. That's the overarching metaphor so often when it comes to how should we overcome or deal with procrastination. And it's try harder, it's fight the resistance, it's this very martial approach to overcoming procrastination. The problem with that, I think, is that it's not especially effective. It seems appealing, and because we all have instances every once in a while where we did kind of like just grit our teeth and white knuckle it and got through procrastination. And so we think about, oh yeah, that one time I did that. The trouble is, yeah, that one time, but what about the 999 times where you tried that and it didn't work? Right? I think about willpower it's sort of like the emergency brake in your car. There are a few very rare situations where you really need an emergency brake. Like let's say you're parking on some steep hill, right? Good to have an emergency brake. But if you're using your emergency brake on a regular basis in the normal act of driving, like if your way of slowing down is like pulling the e-brake, that is not only are you going to ruin your car, but it's like probably unsafe too. Not a very sustainable strategy. Similarly, people who think about overcoming procrastination in terms of willpower, gutting it out, right? Discipline, it is not sustainable. Every once in a while it works, but the vast majority of the time, not only does it not work, it actually tends to make the problem of procrastination worse because it encourages this combative relationship with ourself when we're procrastinating. So we get really critical of ourselves for procrastinating. We call ourselves, a lot of negative self-talk pops up. Why can't you do this? You're so weak. Like, just get over it. Bob over there can do it fine. Why can't I do it? Social comparisons. That's another version of that. We get judgmental with ourselves. And that just really makes things worse because, okay, you were a little bit anxious about starting this project, but now that you've criticized the hell out of yourself, now you're anxious and angry at yourself and feeling guilty with yourself. And so your overall level of emotionality is way bigger, which means you're going to want to avoid or procrastinate even more to get out of feeling all those difficult feelings. Anyway, the combative approach to procrastination, 99 times out of 100, just makes things worse. So what's the alternative? The alternative basically comes down to this idea of chunking. Now, chunking is this. It can apply in a lot of different areas of life, but it's basically if you have some goal, instead of thinking about the goal, I have to achieve the goal. If you want to exercise, well, I have to go exercise. Think about it in smaller units. If you were going to be successful exercising, what are some smaller steps it would take in order to, milestones is a way to think about it, that would get you to this end goal of exercising today? Right? Maybe it's pack my gym bag is one of them. Maybe it's drive to the gym. Right? Maybe it's warm up and stretch a little bit. Right? Maybe, so you can see there's like these incremental, or let's another example, if you're writing a report for work, maybe the first step is just, collect my notes about this project. That's step one. Step two is, ask Bob, because Bob did a report like this 2 months ago. And so like pick his brain a little bit and get some advice. Step three is write the introduction. Step four, yada, 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 right? You get the idea. Now, this seems really obvious and simplistic when you think about it, that any goal is made up of sub-goals or tasks that are required in order to get to the goal. The problem is so many people feel so much resistance to their goals because they just think about them as the big goal. Right? It's like if I wanted to run a marathon and all I ever thought about was just running a marathon, that would be really tough and overwhelming. And instead, I need to think about it day one. My goal is just to go for a walk for 20 minutes because I'm totally out of shape. I haven't run at all. I just need to do the very basics of building up my aerobic fitness level. Right? So this idea of task goal confusion is that so often we conflate the goal, the end goal, finished report, or I've worked out today, with the tasks, the small tasks that it will take to eventually get us to the goal. So many times procrastination comes in we get overwhelmed because all we're thinking about is the goal. And the solution then is to break it down into much smaller steps, even if it seems really silly and stupid, right? And I'll give you some examples of what this could look like. So how do you do this? To kind of sum up here what we've been talking about, instead of trying to willpower your way through procrastination, start breaking down your goals into smaller tasks. So here's what I would recommend. Think of a goal you have that you've been procrastinating on. Write it down, right? Then for that goal, think of all the potential tasks you could or need to take in order to achieve that goal. Okay. I gave a couple examples before, but let's take something really, really simple. I'll tell you one I was doing. Procrastinating on sweeping and blowing my backyard. So lots of leaves and stuff. This happened a couple weeks ago. For literally 3 or 4 days during this, sounds really stupid. I'm a little ashamed to admit, but for 3 or 4 days during the week, I kept looking out the window, looking in the backyard. I'd be sitting out on the porch thinking, look at all these leaves. Like, it doesn't look great. Like, I should really blow and sweep up. And I just didn't do it. I was procrastinating on it. It's the stupidest thing. But I'm sure you all can relate to having these small, mundane things that we procrastinate on. Part of the reason I was procrastinating on that is because I was thinking about it as this big thing, right? I need to blow and sweep. A better way to think about that would have been, you know what I'll do? One easy step I could take is to make sure the batteries for my blower are charged. It takes 20 seconds. I'll walk into the garage, just make sure they're charging. If they're not, I'll charge them, right? Super simple thing. Or even, and this sounds insane, but stay with me, I will find the broom, because my kids like using the broom as a sword and stuff, so it could be anywhere. And that's a little tiny bit of resistance that causes me to procrastinate. So I will find the broom and the blower, and I will make sure they are ready to go. I know exactly where they are. So if I'm, getting ready to go do this, accomplish this goal, there's less friction because I've gone through some of these sub-tasks. So that's a very silly example, but you will be amazed at how much you can lower the resistance to procrastinating by breaking down goals into tasks. Even seemingly stupid, ridiculously small, simple tasks. So that's your homework for this section. What I want you to do is think of, a handful, 3, 5, maybe 10 goals that you've been procrastinating on. They could be tiny ones like sweeping the backyard or replying to that text from my brother-in-law or whatever it is, up to really big things, right? Like prepping my CV because I'm considering leaving my job, or even something like starting my novel. I want to write a novel. So just brainstorm a bunch of goals. Then for each goal, I want you to create at least 3 subtasks that would help you move toward that goal. Okay, so identify at least 3. It's probably at least 3 for the really small ones, right? But for big ones, like, I don't know, putting your CV together or even writing a novel, running a marathon, I don't know, really big ones, you might have 10, you might have 20 sub-goals, but just think of as many as you possibly can, brainstorm. And don't worry, this is a brainstorming exercise. Do not worry if they sound stupid. You want them to be insanely small. Now, this exercise works on 2 levels. First of all, after you've done this, you're going to look at least a couple of those goals and you're going to see the steps and you're like, oh, actually, this, I feel less resistance, less anxiety about this goal because I literally see the steps. It's not just this lofty thing up on top of a mountain. I can see the steps. But the other reason this is helpful is because it's training your mind to break down goals into tasks. And that once you get in that mental habit, that's going to help you forever with any kind of goal that you tend to procrastinate on. Number 3, values misalignment. So in this one, we're going to talk about motivation because obviously when it comes to procrastination, motivation is a key part of overcoming procrastination. You do need motivation. Motivation is just the energy to do something. You do need motivation to overcome procrastination. The problem is people have very fuzzy, often totally incorrect ways of thinking about motivation, which is understandable because there's so many wackadoodle people out there talking about motivation who have no idea what they're talking about. When it comes to what motivation is and how do you get more of it, there's a kind of a couple different ways to think about it. One way that's really common, but not especially realistic or helpful, is the idea that motivation is like it's like you've got a tank inside you, and inside that tank is fuel, right? I call this the fuel theory of motivation. And if you have enough fuel inside of you, then you use up the fuel and it pushes you forward like a car, like a gas tank in a car. And so people kind of conflate this with willpower. They think like, oh, I just need more willpower, right, inside of me, this internal resource. And if I have enough of it, then I can expend it and it will move me toward my goals and it will help me accomplish things. This is intuitive, but actually completely wrong. It's not the right way to think about motivation. The vast majority of time, the much more helpful way to think about motivation is what I call the gravity theory of motivation. So imagine you're a little spaceship, you're flying out through space, right? Yes, you do have a little accelerator in your spaceship and you can like use your fuel and you can go faster. But if you're trying to fly across the galaxy, the much stronger force in the universe, besides your tiny little fuel tank in your spaceship, is something we all call gravity, right? It's this mass. Things that have lots of mass essentially pull other smaller things toward them. That force, if you're a tiny little spaceship and you're orbiting something like a planet or even like the sun, the force that those huge bodies have that they exert on you, that is way stronger than your puny little fuel tank on your rocket ship. The correct way, in my opinion, at least in the context of procrastination, to think about motivation is to stop thinking about the little like internal fuel tank inside of you, which we can call willpower or something like that, and instead start to think about it in terms of values. Because values are like those giant, massive celestial bodies out there in the galaxy. They can exert a tremendous pull. They can help pull you toward your goals so that you don't have to do so much pushing all the time. That's another way to think about this is people tend to think about motivation and procrastination as a push problem. If you can't get to your goal or if you tend to avoid it, you just need to push harder. No, there's very limited returns to that strategy. The much more effective way to think about it is, how can I get other things to pull me toward my goals? And values are the best way to do that, specifically to align your goals with your values. So if I'm trying to get from point A to point B, right, and I'm having a hard time getting over here, well, if I align my goal, this is kind of confusing here, if I align my goal with some big, massive object over here, some giant star or planet, now all of a sudden, I'm going to have a way easier time going toward this goal because there's this big, huge planet pulling me. Using gravity is pulling me that direction. And it's going to help me overcome that resistance along the way. So this idea of aligning your goals with your values is a tremendously, arguably the most powerful way to overcome procrastination. But almost nobody thinks about it. Because again, we're so nasal-gavy. We just think inside of us, I just need to push myself toward my goal. No. You got to think outside yourself if you want to move towards your goals more effectively and overcome procrastination. And your values are this huge reservoir of untapped motivation that we can all use for any goal. That's the thing. This is really powerful because no matter what your goal is, maybe it's you want to write a novel because you're very creative and you want to start this new chapter in your life where you're expressing your creativity more and blah, 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 whatever. Or maybe it's just like, I have to do this really crummy task for work and I hate it and it's a pain, but you know what? It's really important to me because it aligns with my values. So for instance, something like I always use the example of filing your taxes. Nobody likes filing taxes and a lot of people tend to procrastinate on it in part because it's so, it's boring or it's painful. Maybe it's anxiety producing because your finances are a little bit shaky. For whatever reason, the vast majority of people do not like doing their taxes. Now you might think like, well, what values do I have I don't enjoy taxes. I don't have any intrinsic motivation to do my taxes. No, you absolutely do. Because doing your taxes, and there's a lot of different values you might align with this goal of doing your taxes. One of them, for instance, I'll tell you one for me that I use a lot, is quality time with my family. So now you might think quality, well, what the hell does that have to do with taxes? Here's the thing. When I procrastinate One of the hidden downsides of that is I spend way more time overall doing work because I do a little bit of it and then I avoid it and I have to come back to it and I do it. And so I like extend the amount of time that it takes to do a given project because I'm just kind of fiddling with it and then procrastinating, fiddling with it, procrastinating. Ideally, I would just buckle down and get it done in one shot or in a couple different sessions and be done with it. But see, when I fool around and spread out the amount of time over that time, I'm taking time from other things in my life. And one of them that's really important is my kids. If I'm procrastinating and turning a 2-hour task into a 10-hour task, in some ways, it's like I'm stealing hours from my kids because I just keep procrastinating on something. So if I can align my goal or task of doing my taxes, let's say, with this value I have of quality time with my family, especially I think about like, I have young kids right now, 9 all the way down to like 3. This is people call it the magic window, like spend a lot of time with your kids when they're young, and they look up to you and they actually want to spend time with you and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff, which is really great. And that resonates with me. I really do value that idea of spending time with my kids while they're young, quality time with my kids while I'm young. And when I remind myself of that value, it charges me up with motivation because that's so important to me. And I can imagine having plenty of time to go read Harry Potter with my daughter or play volleyball with my other daughter outside or play blocks with my son, just lay on the floor and play blocks and get to see his face light up because he thinks it's hilarious when I do X, Y, or Z, whatever. So when I align my goal, something super boring and unpleasant like taxes, with a personal value, something that I really resonate with, that matters to me a lot. And then I clarify that value. I get really specific about why it matters because my kids aren't going to be young forever. And I love just kind of being a kid with them. I'm so adulty. My personality is so serious and adulty. And I spend so much time doing adulty things that it's easy for me to lose track of the importance of playfulness. That might be another value, right, that you could sub in there. But anyway, I've identified this value and I've made it real. I've spent some time thinking about it. What that generates motivation to help me overcome this tendency to procrastinate, this obstacle to achieving a goal that is really unpleasant and boring, frankly, like doing taxes. And you can think of, there's all sorts of goals that would apply to. Okay, that's a lot. But the point is, if you're struggling with procrastination, think a lot less about willpower and this like internal push myself to my goals, and instead think outside yourself. Particularly, think about your values. What value could I align with this goal that would pull me in that direction and help me overcome my tendency, my urge to procrastinate? So if you want to get started on this, there's a really helpful little exercise. It's called the 5 whys. It's really common in people who are training to become like coaches or therapists or advisors, things like that. You often learn about this technique. I think it's really helpful for clarifying values. And essentially, it's really simple, but very powerful if you really do it. Which is, take a goal like doing your taxes, and you say to yourself, "Why is this important to me?" Well, it's important because I don't want to, have the IRS down my back and, have to get audited, right? Because I didn't do my taxes correctly. Well, why? And so now the second step is ask yourself why again, why that next thing is important. Why is it important not to get audited by the IRS? Gosh, well, for one thing, it would just be a huge pain and time suck. I'd have to go through and find all my receipts for everything. I don't even know if I've kept receipts. I have to look through it'd take me hours and hours and hours, days, weeks of time would get sucked into this. So another why. Well, why is that a problem for you? Well, opportunity cost. If I'm spending, 10 hours a week because, for a month because I'm getting audited by the IRS, that's 10 extra hours that I can't put to other things. Right? Well, why is that a problem? Well, because I want to spend time with my kids. I want to exercise. I want to write new articles and make new videos. There's all these things I want to do. Well, why do you want to do? I think that's the 5th why. Why do you want to write articles and make videos? Well, because I love I just really enjoy helping people, teaching people about psychology and emotional health, in a way that's simple and clear, and most importantly, helpful, so that they can feel confident going out and making a small change to improve their life in some way. Nothing feels better to me in the world than being helpful to someone kind of understand themselves better and take action on moving toward their goals, even in a very, very small way. It lights me up. I love doing that. Okay, so you see what happened. I went through 4 or 5, 6 whys, but I kept drilling down. I started at taxes. Remember? Taxes. Why is it important not to procrastinate on taxes? And by continuing to ask myself why, I drilled down to a really core root reason why getting my taxes done well and timely and in an efficient way, why that's important to me. But I had to kind of go layer by layer by continuing, almost annoyingly, asking myself why does that matter? Why does that matter? And if you do that enough, you will drill down to something really substantive, right? And for me, for instance, it was something like helpfulness. I have this value of helpfulness. I love being helpful, and the way I tend to do that is through my videos and articles and stuff like that. Now, I'm really going to resonate with that value of helpfulness because I've kind of clarified it by thinking through the whys. And I'm going to feel much more motivated to follow through on this goal of doing my taxes, or whatever, the struggle happens to be for you. If you're interested in this idea of how values in particular relate to motivation and procrastination, I have an entire course. I teach a whole course on this, what I call a values-based approach to procrastination. And I have all sorts of kind of concepts and techniques and exercises to help you discover your personal values, to clarify them so that they become increasingly motivating, and then to execute them, to really visualize them and execute them and use them to overcome procrastination and follow through on your goals. From tiny little goals, annoying things again, texting someone back or sending an email, all the way up to really big ones like I want to start some sort of creative project or get back in shape and exercise regularly, all sorts of things. So if you're interested, it's my course is called Finding Focus. And again, I'll put a link in the description below and you can check that out if it sounds like something that would be interesting to you. All right, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you'd like to learn more from me about procrastination and other aspects of emotional health, again, I write a free weekly newsletter called The Friendly Mind. It comes out every Monday morning, and it's full of my best advice, articles, tips, videos, and other resources that I come across to help you strengthen your emotional health, build resilience, and achieve whatever goals are most important to you in your life. You can join for free using the link in the description below. Thanks.